belly's full and all that fun stuff. We're going to talk about fun career type things for a little bit. So today, I've given a few different versions of this talk over the years. This is the modern variant of it. Modern in that I finished it about 3 hours ago, so this should go great. But this is, effectively looking at powering up your career. By the way, does everybody know that this is the session that they're in because the paper's wrong? The paper says that it's a different session. That is for tomorrow. Now, we had to switch, and I guess I didn't get put on the update. But so this is about powering up your career through, embracing the tech community and the concept of public learning. So I know there's a lot of early career, college, even high school in some situations, people that attend this kind of thing. But even in a mature sense, and I'll give myself as an example for this later, embracing these concepts can actually help you with your career and let you further yourself as you go. So super simple agenda thing, what's public learning, da-da-da-da-da. We're going to cover all this stuff here in just a second. And so before we go, I will say I've got a challenge. I hate just rambling for an hour, and I'll also come with door prizes. So here's the deal. If you guys go out, pick a social media platform that you have access to, take a picture of the screen, whatever it is you want to put or interact with this session, tag public learning. I've got $500 in AWS credits to give out, and I will be doing so after the fact. So please do make sure you tag SecureWV, which they will appreciate very much so, and that's how we'll track it down. Yeah. All right, so with that, what about me? All right, so I am Jim Jones. I am born and raised West Virginian. Moved all the way from Scott Depot to Marshall to back to Hurricane. Lived here all my life, but I am a product architect for 1111 Systems, which is the biggest cloud service provider that probably most of you have not heard of. We are the biggest non-hyperscaler. We're VMware's biggest partner, Veeam's biggest partner, Cohesity's biggest partner, Zerto's biggest partner. And as a product architect, I like to refer to myself as a Frankenstein lab nerd. My job is to take all these different companies that we work with and in the back end, mash them together and make products that make sense to you come out. So for example, like using object storage as backup repositories or creating NSX integrated IaaS platforms for microsegmentation and things like that. You can find me pretty much everywhere on the internet, either through one version of Kool-Aid or the other. So Kool-Aid.info is Blue Sky on my website, Kool-Aid IT for socials. Like I said, from here, lived here, all kinds of degrees, all that fun stuff. Certification from lots of stuff. I love to learn things, and certifications is typically my way of like giving myself a baseline to get started on something new. Because I'm like, well, if I'm going to take the time to learn this thing, I might as well get something of value right off the top. And then the bottom one is one of the things we're going to talk about. So I'm in a bunch of different vendor community programs. So I'm in the top tier for Veeam, VMware, the bottom tier for AWS, and then also a company called Object First in their community programs. And so where all this kind of starts with is let's talk about the concept of public learning. Okay, so whether you're earlier in your career or if you're more mature in your IT career, at this point, you've probably figured out the learning's never, ever going to stop. Okay, I spoke at Mount West Cybersecurity Expo this spring, and there was a bunch of college kids in there, and I talked to a few, and they're like, well, I can't wait to be done with college, and then I can just kind of settle in and make money and do things. And I'm like, oh, buddy, this isn't going to stop. This technology changes every single day. Now, there's two ways to approach this. There is this concept of, I'm going to go out, I'm going to watch YouTube videos, or I'm going to read a book, or I'm going to take a class, or I'm going to do this, and I'm going to learn it, and I'm going to suck all that knowledge in for myself. What I'm going to advocate for you today is the concept of public learning, which is as you're learning it, have the confidence in yourself to be able to say, okay, I am in the process of learning this thing, and as I learn this, I'm going to talk some way, shape, or form about my experiences of learning that kind of thing. because that does a number of things. One, it's just the ability of you to put what you're learning and putting that information out there for consumption and for it to also evolve. Okay, I do this not to say, oh, please look at me and all these kind of things. As I like to say, it's a mindset. It's the concept of, here's my thoughts, and my thoughts are mine, but they're also open for interpretation, and your version of my thoughts may be different than mine. And I'd love to hear your viewpoint on it in this situation so that I can evolve how I think about this technology as well as pretty much everything in life, right? But you can, for anybody here ever given a talk or taught a class or anything like that? Okay, so a couple. You know, they always, you get two versions of that talk, is those that can do, those that can't teach. But there's the better version of that conversation, which is teaching something is the best way to fully cement the concepts in your mind. And so teaching doesn't need to be standing up here or standing in front of a college classroom or something like that. It can be as simple as, I'm going to write a blog post about this thing that I just learned, and I'm just going to put it out there and let the world interpret it. Does that make sense? And so finally on this, it's an excuse to be collaborative. I always, I've been blogging for 2003 is when I started, so 22 years. And so I've always had the concept of, it was my brain dump. It was my pensive, for those of the Harry Potter ilk. My place to drop information that I've gathered over the years. And then I always like to end with a challenge of, hey, if you've got a different version of this or you think I'm wrong, tell me. Let me know, because that's how we get better with it. And so how can public learning, kind of come out and be if you're going to do this kind of thing? So, if you're an old head like me, blogging is probably the way to go, okay? You probably wrote all that kind of stuff. Newer generation, it may be YouTube, it may be Twitch, it may be podcasts that you're doing. If you're into code, it can be GitHub. Go out, as you're learning how to do Python, create your own scripts, put them out there. It could be doing exactly this, speaking at a conference and expressing what you've learned as a thing, okay? Or finally, the quickest version of it is social media. Just, as I kind of got started, shit posting your way through conferences. And if I'm not going to hate on anybody if any of you feel the need to do the same here. So public learning is one thing. Okay, so one of the other ways that public learning can manifest itself is through the embracing of the tech community. So you see all these nice people here that have the green t-shirts on, and you see all the people here that have the black t-shirts on. Okay, so guess what? You guys are all effectively in a tech community as you sit right now. Okay, this is a great opportunity to, get out, meet people. All of us that are engineers, nerds, whatever, there is the stereotype that we are the introverts of introverts. Okay, this is an open challenge to get you to purposefully buck that trend. Okay, because it can do you and do yourself well. So yeah, you're already in it. It can mean different things to different people in terms of tech community. It's the concept, you can be social media, you can be attending things, a lot of places is like Discords and Slacks, or it could be the vendor programs that we were talking about earlier, which are a kind of if you don't know what the product is, you are the product kind of a situation. But it's to say if you're heavily involved in a particular software stack or a certain thing, I know Sophos has programs. I know that Arctic Wolf has a program, things like that, that it gets you opportunities to go through and talk to people at these companies and get to know their products deeper, while also getting to talk and work with others that are around it, if that makes sense. But so think of it as public learning, but you're doing it with other people, okay? And the goal is to grow yourself as you grow your network, okay? I mean, who here has got beat about their head and neck with the concept of soft skills throughout their career or college or things like that? That you have to develop soft skills, be able to do those things. All right. So then that leads to, why should I care about these things? Okay, I've kind of given you the concept of tech community, public learning, and there are lots of benefits to embracing this kind of thing, okay? So I'm a big fan of saying the idea that if you are the smartest person in the room, it's time to find a new room. My career, I've been in IT since 2001 is when I got out of college. And 2013, I was working for the West Virginia Housing Development Fund. And my boss was awesome. And he's like, you should start going to tech conferences. And I'm like, okay, I'd love to start going to tech conferences. So he sent me to SecureWV that year. At that point in time, it was 2013, and there was a grand total of 3 of what's called CCIEs in the entire state of West Virginia, which is the top level Cisco certification. And if you were around Charleston for more than 2 years, you knew all 3 of them because they all worked for Cisco, except for one guy who worked for ATS. I go to SecureWV, they have this whole concept of like a social media hub that had a bunch of really fancy white couches, and I'm just kind of roaming around, just kind of looking and seeing what's going on. And I sit down on one of these couches and I'm sitting there talking, and it gets to a point where we're all talking about really deep networking tech. And there's 15 people on these couches, and I'm the only non-CCIE. And so my mind got a little blown. It was one of those like, oh, okay, these are where the really, really, really smart people are. And so rather than take the concept of I'm just going to shut up and listen, there was absolutely some of that. There was also this concept that was very impactful to me in my career because it gave me the confidence to say, hey, you know what? Here are these people that I put on this pedestal that's about 4 miles high, and I can hold my own in a conversation with them and have different experiences than what they've ran into. Because I've always been the sysadmin, net admin style of role where, I've got knowledge 4 miles wide, but about 3 inches deep, but I could dive when I needed to into something deep. But then it purged and went somewhere else. These people do nothing but networking or did nothing but voice. And so when you could equate things that they were doing, that was a pretty powerful thing. But it was a good thing. It was a really impactful time for me. Also set up my Twitter account walking down the hallway of that because somebody said, oh, you should set up Twitter, which back then wasn't this horrible thing that it is today. But it was also very important in, kind of my career progression. But really, in terms of the professional growth, you guys, I can look around here and I bet that in at least one silo, all of you feel very confident about what you do with technology and how you do it. Would you feel confident in standing up in front of a room and talking about that thing? And that's part of what I'm advocating for here is take that scary step and begin to go through and put yourself, step out of your comfort zone and make yourself start talking about those things that you're knowledgeable about because your voice does matter. And while you may be writing the 50th blog post about how to create an Active Directory user, it's your version of that story or it's your version of that story. And that may resonate to a different person, different than the other version of that content. And it'll also solidify that knowledge for yourself. And that's the extreme low end of how you can put that concept, but that's really what it gets at. But what you're doing is you're using other people's brains to enhance your own, okay? And going forward, and finally, it gives you a chance to branch out. Like I said, I've been a Windows sysadmin, I've been a network guy, I've been a virtualization admin, I've been a backup guy, I've been a voice guy, I've been all those kind of things. Over the last 10 years, since I've truly embraced all of these concepts, it's one of those things that having that tech community and embracing those conversations have spurred different things. I'm now getting deeper into security because I come to events like this. I'm now understanding concepts around how the things that I was already doing can integrate with others in a more deep and more rich way, if that makes sense, and using that to further myself as well as my company. So then there's the fringe benefits. I always say that the people and the knowledge is the first part, and then there's the more intrinsic kind of things. So as I was telling these guys here a little bit, I'm about as knee deep in the Veeam software universe as you can possibly get. Not next week, but the week after that, I'm flying out to Prague for a week to meet with their R&D engineers for a week, that they're just covering all of that. Lots of these like vendor programs have travel components to them. Microsoft MVP has MVP Summit that they fly everybody out to Seattle once a year, and you talk to the Microsoft engineers and stuff like that. So there's that aspect. You know, if doing things like this is something that you're interested in, like speaking, there's usually capability to translate that into learning about public speaking. I noticed on the program for this thing, they actually have classes here for this of how to get started and how to get better as a public speaker. If you are enrolled in that, do go. It's amazing what it can do for you, not just as a, like I said, I am probably the least look at me kind of person you guys would actually ever meet. But what I do find important is that I can share information, but it will help you in, I've got to go to this C-level and I've got to convince them to do this thing, or I've got to go and do this thing at work, or I need to convince people to do X, Y, and Z. It helps with all of that stuff. So it's definitely a benefit. There is the whole gear, software, and services thing. Again, back to the material stuff. You know, you get involved with any vendor program in any way, shape, or form. Shoot, VMware's vExpert program, which I've been in for a decade, there used to be a whole sheet. I think you still can go to vexpert.com/benefits, and there's a whole sheet of here's all the free shit we're going to give you just for being a vExpert. And that's not the VMware side, that's everybody else. I haven't paid for a remote desktop client in like 10 years at this point because they keep giving them away. Or, you know, last year they sent me, Synology sent me a box just to play with. So I'd write a blog post. But then there's swag, so all the clothes, backpacks, all that fun stuff. And then, you know, to be kinder and gentler friends, you know, all that fun stuff. So I've made some pretty awesome friendships through kind of embracing the tech community that, you know, here I am, 50-year-old dude from West Virginia who's really never lived anywhere but here. You know, this picture up here is actually from Berlin last year, and there's Ohio, Canada, the UK, me, all in one picture, and we get together every year one way or another and talk to each other all the time. And then finally there's the whole, like, you know, why do we do anything in our career? And that is we want to kind of make money. We want to be fulfilled. So this is the very generic version of it. Of like I kind of map like social things in my life, and as I've embraced the tech career, so like way back here I started Kool-Aid.info, I went to Cisco Live, I became a vExpert, went to VMworld, started speaking at Veeam's conference, and then I moved over into the service provider space, and you know, as the kids say, line goes up, and life's been pretty good since then. So this is definitely a thing that, and honest to God, in all of that stuff, I can absolutely point at, I set up a Twitter account walking down the pathway at Cisco Live and trace a path from that to the job that I'm in now. Because my last two jobs have all been people that I've met through these community programs, and I literally haven't written a resume since 2010. And because it's just not needed. And a lot of it is effectively your life, your public writings, your public persona becomes that thing. It becomes a living version of it. All right, so if this does interest you, if trying to do these kind of things is, you know, kind of living out loud, if you will, is interesting to you, where do you get started? Okay, so I kind of already said this a little bit. You got to put yourself out there, okay? Be part or around of the conversation. If you are not a naturally outgoing person, which lots of us aren't, believe it or not, you know, I am an outgoing person, but these kind of events drain the living crap out of me. I've got to go home and find a quiet place for a little bit after it. Go and just find a group of people out here in the hallway afterwards. You know, even if you're not speaking to them right off, start listening, or go into the CTF room. Those are some of the coolest guys that I've ever met in my life. Am I a capture the flag type person? Oh, hell no. I am more the, I want to protect the flag is more my jam. But go in, sit down, listen to the conversations. What you'll find is you can be part of it very quick. You have to be open, okay? Be open to different viewpoints. You know, Who here has been or has met the IT person that, dear God in heaven, this is how we do it, because it's how we've always done it, and we're never going to do it another way because it's what's safe, okay? That's great for right this minute. Or maybe in some situations, and I'm going to see a lot of heads shake here in a second, it's what was great 5 years ago, okay? My friend Patrick over here, we were having lunch, and he's like, oh, the best way to protect RDP is to put an RDS gateway in front of it. And I'm like, no! Anyway, it's just different ways to do it. So, and like I said, as I said earlier, be willing to put you, yourself, your viewpoint, your version of whatever the concept it is that's interesting you out there, and don't worry about, oh my God, this sucks. I hate to write myself. First time I ever spoke at a conference, I was speaking, and many of you, especially the ones that are from here, do you have an accent? No, at least up until that point, in my mind, I had no accent. And the first time I did it, I watched the recording, and I was like, oh my God, who is this hick, and what holler did he fall out of? And it was an eye-opening thing, but here's the thing. The people that actually heard it, they're like, we don't care, and your content was actually really, really good. But what I'm saying is there's no such thing as you're not going to write bad content. It may not be the most verbose, literary work that's ever happened, or it may be, you don't have the people mashing that subscribe button on your YouTube channel, but it's going to be good for you, and it's going to get better the more you do it, okay? And most importantly, follow what interests you or where your passion's at, I'm in a situation now where, from my, social media content and blogging content kind of thing, it's a split brain of I have my stuff that I write for me, but I also write for my company. So there's certain things that I've got to go write and, make pretty in a marketing way to put on our corporate website. And they're like, we need you to write about this thing. And I'm like, guys, I could not care about step 3 of the NIST framework. But I've got to do that. But when you're talking about being part of a tech community, go do what's important and what gets you up, what makes you excited about technology. Because, IT is a hell of a lot of work to not like it. Okay, so if you're here and you're putting in the effort enough to be able to to care enough to come somewhere else to talk about this kind of stuff, you probably have some variant of a passion about technology. Be willing to find whatever version of that is and just start talking about it. The same way you would go out in the hallway. My college English professor would probably just hate to read anything that I write, but I write in a conversant manner, and some people like that. And I like it, so it's fine. Okay, but it's what I'm passionate about, all right? So from a where do I make things work on the road, and where do I get started kind of thing, I like to say that step 1 is discover your brand, okay? So, you've seen Kool-Aid references up here already. I don't know how many people know your mass murderer history. But so my name is Jim Jones. There was the Reverend Jim Jones who killed 500 people with cyanide-laced Kool-Aid. Once I found out about that, me and my dark, twisted sense of humor decided to kind of make that my persona. And so I've got, I own 4 different versions of a Kool-Aid domain names. It's just, that's a whole different conversation. I've got a bad habit. I get stressed and I buy domain names. But, figure out what's your thing. What is it you want to put out there? Figure out your niche. It may be tech related. It may be personal related. My wife's got a website that's Travels with Tracy, and it works for her, and she's happy. Don't be afraid to just kind of go a little crazy with it to that point. If anybody wants Kool-Aid stickers, I have those as well. And it can be just as simple as, hey, I'm learning as I go, and we kind of figure it out. When you're thinking of what that brand is, yes, the Kool-Aid one is my thing, and it's kind of dark and twisted. I will tell you, as you go out and you talk to people, or you're writing things, or you're working under that thing, don't be obnoxious with it. Be positive, be yourself, kind of be dressed for the job you want. Early 2000 or 2010s IT in Charleston was very business casual. I'm more of a shorts and a t-shirt kind of guy. And so I was, this is kind of a personification of, I want to be a little more chill than a lot of these other things. But I've actually I've lost a job opportunity because they thought that my email address was not serious enough. So as you're thinking about how am I going to create my tech community brand or, all those kind of things, be mindful of that. But also just don't be crude and don't be toxic. There are flame bait people. I mean, you guys have all been on the internet. You know how this goes. The 4chanification of tech community does happen, and it's a pretty quick way to get yourself out of it. And then once you kind of figure out what you want your brand to kind of be, step one, before you say a word to anybody, because we're all shitheads, and we will absolutely go and just start locking down domain names out of spite. Go lock everything down. Go get a domain name. Get all the social media profiles to think you might want. Even if it's not really, you're not quite sure if you're going to do it anyway. If you get another idea, go lock those down too. Because it's easier to undo those things than it is to do it once you've kind of let the cat out of the bag. I've had friends that decided on a whim to go through and change their social media handle just for some certain thing, like who was it? Like one of the big top influencers in the VMware world decided to make his handle one year Chris at VMworld because he could get it, and he was amazed that he could. When he went to switch it back, somebody had gone through and registered his name behind him, and so he lost his handle, and there was a whole negotiation that ended up with him having a 2D cutout of himself at VMworld the next year, that he had to take pictures of himself with his 2D cutout all over because it was, again, we're all shitheads. But yeah, I mean, you can don't be afraid to do variants, so like, he said, I'm different versions of Kool-Aid everywhere as it goes. You can't be exact. And then if you want to kind of unify things, look at services like Zapier or N8N these days, to where you can go through and say, okay, I have all of these domains, I have all of these handles. When I post something on Blue Sky, go and make it go everywhere. Or if I post it over here, unify it the other way. You know what I mean? So that you have a unified voice going out. But really, what I'm going to keep talking about is remove the friction for yourself. If this is something that's interesting for you, there's going to be all kinds of reasons not to be outgoing, not to write, not to create videos. I go through periods where it's like, I don't want to write. I'm learning about this thing, and it's really interesting, but I really don't want to write about it, or I really don't want to record this thing. Get rid of the things that'll make you want to stop doing it. If it's something that doesn't really interest you, then don't do it and go do something else if you can, okay? If you like coding, start with GitHub. It's the easiest thing that you can do, especially for the young people around here. When I talk to, people that are in college, or like I've got a field full of God kids, the first thing that I tell them to do as freshman 101 is set up a LinkedIn and set up a GitHub repo if you're doing tech, okay? And then whatever you do, you write on LinkedIn. Anything that you write, plop it into that GitHub repo. Some you might want to have a public and you might want to have a private so you can kind of lock things down between the two. But just put it there, and then you've got that repository going forward, and it costs you literally nothing. You know what I mean? If you're into video or blogging, everybody here's probably got a smartphone at this point. YouTube is a free app. Go crazy. Or it might be, like I said, speaking in person, or if you can't do the in-person thing. Me personally, I prefer this format. I like to be around people so I can see reactions. I have friends that just have crippling social anxiety, but they love to do public knowledge, and they are an absolute terror on a Discord channel or on a Slack, and they will go through and do the greatest talks that I've ever heard. But they just do it on a live stream. They'll go through, they set up a StreamYard account, and they put their stuff out there, invite people to chat as they go, and that's their version of that. And what works today may not be what works for you tomorrow. So I've kind of gone back and forth between doing speaking that's fun this month or this year, or it might be next month I want to blog a bunch, or I want to record videos. I like to, as a personal thing, I like to go walk. So my next thing I keep saying is I'm going to do what I call the literal walkthrough, where I go for a walk and I've got a little camera and I just talk to it while I'm walking, because I am a dork and it seems funny to me. But be willing to move to whatever it is that you're thinking about doing. And really with that, that's about all the content I've got. Is there any questions? Yes, sir.
Do you recommend any resources or packages? Like I know GitHub has a student pack where you get like free stuff. Do you have anything else you recommend? Like, does any of the partners you're with have like any sort of like I think AWS has this sort of thing?
Yeah, so there's all kinds of like easy ways to kind of get started on this kind of stuff. One thing that I would look like if you're a coder or you think that you'd like to play in code, or even if you just want to read on these kind of things, it's wrapping up right now, but like GitHub has a program called Hacktober that you can actually get t-shirts, get involvement and stuff like that, just for working and within other public open source GitHub repositories. That's one good way to start. Honestly, at this point, social media, so I used to say, go set up a Twitter account, because that's where the tech community is. Now it's a lot more fractured. There's a little bit of Twitter, there's a little bit of Blue Sky, there's a bit of Mastodon. Probably, God help us, the common one these days is LinkedIn. And I'd absolutely tell you about how, me using the restroom this morning affected B2B sales, or taught me about B2B sales, but that's a whole other joke. But those are all free and easy things to start with. But honestly, like any of the learn to code programs, any of there's a Reddit that is learning Linux in 15 days. That is even if you already know Linux, that is a wonderful community, because it's people that are actually literally just there wanting to learn. It's the Linux Upskill Challenge, so r/Linux Upskill Challenge. Get in there and they go through a different topic on each of those 15 days, and after 15 days they just recycle and start over again. But what you find is if you're mature into that technology already, or you've been already through it, they stay as part of the conversation and help others as they go forward, and better solidify that information as they do it. There's always options for how to do it. It's just a matter of, what are you willing to do, or how do you want to do it? All right. If there's not any others, yes, sir.
Talk about certifications.
Yes, sir.
What's your take on how do you avoid going down a path and 2 years later it's not worth anything? I'm sure if you did networking stuff, you knew guys that were certified totally with no bet.
Yeah. Yep.
Microsoft System certified engineer.
So here's the deal.
How do we avoid that stuff?
You don't. Because here's the deal. So technology is an evolution. Everything that we do today, we can point and find, little fingers of it into something else. And I look at AI, which is the new current hotness, okay? Well, there's legs into, database systems. There's legs into object storage systems. There's legs into this. There's legs into that. We're always going to be iterating. I mean, like I said, I'm 20 years into this at this point. I've been a Cisco CCNA. I've been VMware VCP, like 3 different versions of it. Actually, my CCNA, I've done security. I've done voice, because I was a voice guy for a long time. I've done the networking. And I feel like there's one other one there. Oh, the DevNet one, the Python one. And all of those have just been iterations of myself over the career. You're never going to stop learning, okay? And everything that you learn, let's say it is Novell. Yeah, Novell was what it was, and today you never saw it. You know what else actually really never was the OSI model. But can you imagine having to understand anything about networking without first understanding the OSI model? Novell eDirectory is Active Directory today. to a large extent. Active Directory never would have existed if eDirectory didn't. So you learn that to learn this. So I get what you're saying, because going down a certification path is typically a very expensive conversation, both in terms of money as well as in time. You know, put your feelers out there. If you aren't in a situation where you could be very early in a technology, in something that truly makes sense, that's going to make hold, like I wouldn't be doing an AI cert today if anybody would pay me money, because this thing's going to flame out so hard it's not even going to be funny. But you know, if you see something that really excites you, go for it, because it's your passion, and you'll be able to get through it faster and cheaper than what you think you can. You know, unfortunately, there's still some like certification platforms out there that force you. I have to take the class. Okay, like you look at VMware, God help me, that you have to take a class before you can take the first cert. But after you get past that first one, you can take all you want. Cisco was much easier, that you could just go through, and anybody that could pass the test could get the cert. Try to prioritize those. You know, maybe, you know, look for the more open situations. Like CompTIA doesn't make you take anything, so start there as a starting point. And that entry level thing that you do may give you the path and the capability and the knowledge to be able to make a job change, if that's what you're looking for. And as you do that, you can negotiate your way of saying, hey, these are part of my career goals. I want to make, if I come work for you, can we put into the agreement that once every 2 years I get a class, or just ask the question, do you have an education program to where I can expect to take certification or get a training, you know, X number of years. One of the best investments I've ever made, and I know, you know, for others this may seem like a good chunk of money, is a Pluralsight account. It's $300 a year. I will say that if you can get yourself into AWS Community Builder, or they give you QA for free every year, and Skill Builder. If you can get into vExpert, they give you Pluralsight for free. And AWS Community Builder and vExpert is a relatively low bar, right? You go out and write me 3 blog posts on VCF, and I will be happy to sponsor you into vExpert, and then you'll have that as a tech community thing, and let all the free things come raining down upon your head. You know what I mean? So I've very long and traveling way to answer your question, but really I don't believe that there's this such thing as choosing the wrong path, because no matter what, you've learned something. Does that make sense? Yes, sir.
I have a question that's about to piggyback off this. When is the last time something you learned in your Microsoft Certified Systems in the year 2000 certification been used in practice? Because I'm pretty sure I'm throwing you a softball, but based on the knowledge you got back in 2000, when is the last time you've been able to summon that information?
Oh, I mean, I'm still using Intra ID today, and that's, you know, Active Directory, and that was my first iteration into that. I feel like you're giving me a softball to something very specific, but
Well, I mean, I'm just
like SMB, I mean,
you brought up Novell.
yeah,
You and I both had
yeah.
the NT4 and NT classes to a gentleman who was a
Yes,
CNE.
Patrick and I went to college together.
And this CNE had absolutely no problem learning and doing the Microsoft because he'd already learned all the
Mhm.
Novell stuff.
Yeah.
And I would think if in a job interview you can say to them, I know you'll see that A+ certification result, but I've kept up with it and I can make sure I'm a great computer, or I was a CNE, I know how the network works. If you can articulate to them,
Yep.
this is a skill I have and I didn't lose it, it can be valuable still.
Yeah, and like I said, my bread and butter these days is all around backup and replication and stuff like that. And so as we talk about backup, it's creating lots of data really, really fast and securely. So that bridges itself into, I have to know how storage systems work. So like fast forward, shoot, even today we still have NTFS-based repositories around, so you have to know all that kind of stuff. Today it's more object storage, but object storage is just a database identifying as a file system. So you have to know how databases work. And so you have to kind of know, you know, All of that stuff all kind of iterates and it builds upon itself. So, any others? All right. Well, guys, hey, and girls, thank you for coming, and I appreciate it, and hope you have a great rest of your day.